Hi, Gary.
Hello.
Hi, Carol. Hi. So we're going to start with a really simple question. How did you get started working in textile?
Should I answer?
You may.
I beg to differ. I would like to follow behind you.
Want me to?
Yes, of course.
I'd like to say that I started, my first quilt that I made, okay, was when I got married. I made it for my husband and I, just because I had all this fabric, right? And I had been in a wedding previously where someone gave my friends who were getting married this magnificent quilt. Prior to that, I'd never had quilts on my radar. But that's not really when I started working with textiles. I learned to sew probably in elementary school. And I took a liking to it, and it was a good thing because I could never find clothes that fit me since I was always the shortest person in the room. Okay? So I made my clothes, a lot of clothes, and my mother taught me embroidery. She was kind of crafty. She did crochet and embroidery and that sort of thing. So yeah, I've always had my hands on fabric and needle and thread. So it just kind of came natural. After I received a BFA from Wayne State, I really was not interested in painting. So this kind of opportunity that came just to make a quilt, really a functional quilt. It was not art. Wasn't until after maybe I had made 3, 4, 5 quilts, all functional, that I decided this can be art. I don't have to use paint or be a sculptor or whatever. So I never look back. So I've been doing it ever since, and evolving. The work that I do now is quite different from the work that I did when I first began. It's all fabric, and that's what I'm. Yeah. You may speak now.
Thank you. Since I have your permission. I started making a quilt back in 1990. Just imagine in prison, men working for the first time to do a quilt, a signature quilt for a program they called hospice. It was to signify the men who had been recruited to take care of the farm and the dining in prison. And we did a collage that each volunteer had a place that if they want to do something, it would be put on the quilt. Never thinking at the time that this would be something that would later mushroom into my life. I did it happily. Now, that was the first time that I ever thought about participating in doing a quilt. Fast forward, many years later, guys approached me about helping them out to make quilts for the rodeo. Now, it's kind of like out of my character because I was in a prison where it's about maintaining your masculinity. So I felt making quilts was quite feminine inside of a prison. But the guys who have asked me, they were friends of mine. And since we were in the gym, in the room in the back, I felt, hey, all right, nobody was thinking. Well, so they started showing me what I needed to do. And would you believe that learning the technique of quilting, it became comfortable. And one thing I learned, that when you start anything off from the start, it seems to be complicated. But to those who have been doing it for so long, it's very simple. Look at these hands. Trying to sew a quilt with a needle, trying to put a number on the fingers. It didn't work. So I wanted the easy way out. I wanted to learn the sewing machine. And as they showed me how to use the sewing machine, and knowing that the blocks, the squares, and everything that I was cutting out, and how every piece that I sewed together was coming together, it was like, wow, this is something that eventually coming to life. But you know, when you start off something, you want to be different. You want to do something different. And I wanted to do something that really going to get people's attention. So, in the process, it's like this light popped up in my head. Gary, you have something that many don't have. That you have a skill that you can utilize into quilting. I have gotten my certificate, diploma in graphic art while I was in prison. And I was assigned to do one of you could say, the institution popular magazine they called the Angelite. And I was assigned to put that magazine together. And I learned applicate in the process. And I realized that I could use that technique into making quilts. And that's what I started doing. And I started doing the signature piece for the rodeo. It was convicts on a bull, horse, or chasing a cow to milk a cow. And those pieces being raffled off. Now, can you imagine after the rodeo, they were saying that, man, people love that quilt. And those quilts that they was talking about was the quilt that I was the one that made. So I said, okay, now how could I up the game? And as time went on, every quilt that I made, it sold. One in particular, I made a quilt, and when I left prison, I wish I could have had that money in my pocket. That made over $90,000.
Who owns that quilt?
To be honest with you, I do not know. It was a quilt that was raffled off at the rodeo. I don't know if many of you are familiar with the rodeo that they have in Angola during the fall, the summer and fall rodeo. In October, sometimes you have 5 rodeos. And at the end of the rodeo, they sell raffle tickets, and sometimes people come in and buy 10, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 100 raffle tickets. And when it was announced at the meeting the following day that quilt made over $90,000, the prison officials wanted me to make another one like that. And I told them that I do not make this. Not knowing that was really a power move. So, I got into the joy of making quilts. But like always, when you see your work manifest, you want to do better. It tends that you challenge yourself. And one thing that had to reflect back on as a little kid, that I remember gone to the country out in Tallulah, I used to see my grandmother making quilts. As a child, I didn't know what to do. They was just blankets. But you know what? These quilts that she made, they kept us warm during the winter. And what she made these quilts out of was rags. The stuffing was made out of old clothing, newspapers, and moss that was held from the tree. And, you know, having to remember those things seemed like my life became full circle. Was that this one thing that I can continue the tradition in my family. And also having to witness my mother. I mean, I don't know, I probably know this one in there, who raised their hand and said that I'm not. Nonetheless. That back then, since those of you in here that are old, do you remember the old Sears catalogs? The J.C. Penney's catalog? And remember in the inside they used to have these they called the drawings, patterns that they used to make dresses and everything. My mother, she was a seamstress, and she made, you know, dresses for herself and my sisters. And, you know, remembering those things kind of like gave me, you could say, a comfort knowing that I was following the tradition of my grandmother as well as my mother. Now, I'm in prison, of course, feeling as though that making quilts was a feminine thing. I felt that it was a masculine thing as well. And to the point where guys loved it. Because they realized that what we were doing, that we was making quilts to support the men that they knew, men that they had befriended, men that became family to them, that was dying in prison. And that we were making it possible that these men would die in comfort, that these men, family would be able to visit them because the money that we was making, it was being utilized to help the guys' families that come from the surrounding cities in Louisiana and also those who was out of state. That we helped pay for the rent of the hotels, transportation, and everything else. So that itself gave us all comfort knowing that we was doing an admirable thing that helped our fellow men that unfortunately passed in prison. And when they did, the blankets that we made for them went to their families.
Beautiful. So I want to fast forward to today and ask you both a question a little bit off script. So for both of you, your work in outside in the belt and inside here, the gallery, is a departure. Carol, this is your first mural, and you're a textile, so it's quite different. And Gary, this is your first solo exhibition. And all of these images on the quilts that you see on this wall and behind us are taken from photographs that people took of you during your time incarcerated. So we're talking about working in a new material, working in a new form, working in a new space for both of you. And I wonder if you could just speak to the experience of working in a new way.
I'll go first because I know Gary has so many interesting stories. But yeah, you know, I kind of have always been interested in my work, as I said, is quite different today than it was when I first, the first book I made over 50-some years ago. And as, you know, I've been doing it long enough now that I can look back and see how the evolution of my work over the years. And it was not, maybe not conscious, but I was always striving to do something, as Gary said, something different. And it still continues to evolve. So I'm happy that, you know, I had this opportunity to have a work translated or transferred into a mural. I didn't have a whole lot to do with the actual doing of it. We took, you know, Allison was, you know, this wonderful curator. She selected a piece that I think was really difficult to transition into, from a fiber piece to kind of a flat surface, a flat piece, and still capture the essence of what I was doing in fiber. And I'm excited to see that, you know, how it evolved and how it happened. I look forward to the opportunity probably of doing more. Early on, I thought, you know, I kind of have a real strong design background. For many years, I've practiced interior design. And at one point, I thought that I would probably design fabrics. You know, I was interested in making my own fabrics, which I still kind of do as a quilter. You know, putting things together, pieces of fabric. I am designing fabrics, but I'm not for commercial or reproduction. So that's an area. I mean, you always look at where you can make your mark, I guess, and expand your brand, as they would say today. So there are lots of other areas that I'm really looking forward to moving into. You know, it's just not, for me, it's just not static. You know, I love being in my studio and doing the work that I do the way I do, but I'm always kind of thinking ahead, moving, you know, not only what the next quilt is, because you're always trying to make the next one better than the last one, but I'm still always thinking of other ways that I can use the skills that I have and apply to other areas. So, yeah, this was a very exciting opportunity, and again, thank you.
Thank you, and also it was a team effort, so a special shout out to Leah and the team here at Library Street.
And a great painter that they put,
And a great painter.
you know, to execute the work.
What about you, Gary? Working in this new way?
Wow. Well, you know, it took me some time to get back into quilting. And the reason that happened is because I wanted to get grounded when I was released from prison. I went to prison at the age of 16 years old. And I was a dependent on my family. I didn't know anything about paying rent, working, having responsibilities. I was one of those kids that depended on his mother and father. So being released after 4 decades, I know that I had to hit the ground running, meaning that not trying to make up for the 4 decades that I lost, but trying to establish a life for myself. And what I knew that I had to start from was that I had to reintegrate myself back into society. I had to get an identity, meaning official papers, recognizing that I am someone that is free, not carrying around a prison ID. Also, I had to take and get a job. But fortunately, thanks to the supporters that I had that stuck with me for a very long time, who assured me whenever I am free, I have a place to lay my head. Fortunately, I was able to meet a couple who had supported me since 1976, who came to an event that the organization, the Drama Club, put on the Passion of Jesus Christ. They came to New Orleans inquiring about me and was informed that the Drama Club was putting on a production. And they came, they inquired about me. I got word, and I went up there and sat with them in the audience and watched the production itself. I depended on the men and women that I took and recruited and who have I think about them all the time. They did an excellent job and they performed. Nonetheless, Pam and Steve assured me whenever I am free, I can come stay with them. And do you know what? That was in 2013. And I feel what they did, they blew life into my freedom. And that it eventually manifested. Seemed like all the stars started to align with each other. And day after day, weeks after weeks, months, years, everything started aligning to the point where freedom come knocking on my door. I was somewhat afraid to open that door because I didn't want to be disappointed. But you know what? Freedom refused to be denied. In 2016, April the 29th, 2016, I walked out that prison.
At 12 p.m.
At 12 p.m. And you know, I had to go back to prison to get my stuff and to sign out. I'm not a religious man, but I'm a very spiritual man. I know the Bible from the back to the front to the back. And I always use these little sayings in the Bible that I had the patience of Job and that I had the soul of soul. When I left that prison, I dare not look back. Not that I was afraid that I may turn into a pillar of salt, but I didn't want to go back, so I didn't look back. I say that getting out of prison, it wasn't so much of a challenge for me because I had those who have dedicated their lives to assure me that I won't have a hard time being free, despite what I went through, despite what I lost. The most regrettable thing about it all, that my mother wasn't there. But I knew that she's with me eternally in soul. And when it came down to me, 6 years later, due to friends and people constantly knowing me about Gary, do what you do best. People telling me, you are your greatest asset. And I would like to say this. I had a conversation with a guy when I came to Detroit, November of last year. He said something that, whether he realizes it or not, something that resonated with me because people have been telling me this for a very long time, that my greatest asset was myself. And I knew that this was a calling and that I had to get off my duff. I had to stop making excuses about why I shouldn't call myself, you could say, rekindling the things that I once did while I was in prison, making quilts and doing every other thing. That when I went back to the studio, I pondered what I wanted to do. I took it safe. I wanted to do butterflies because I felt it shows an evolutionary of my life. And you know what? To me, it was more than that because I still was trying to take an easy way out by trying to tell people that when I left prison, I didn't leave prison hard. I didn't leave prison being bitter. That it was more to just me transitioning like a butterfly. That people heard my story, read my story, even heard it personally from me. But I felt, what could I do to transcend that into showing that this is who I am, more than just a victim of the system, in which case I don't consider myself a victim. I'm not going to claim that title. Because you know what? If it took that to make me who I am today, then hey, I accept that. But I knew one thing, that I had to make a statement by showing the people that what you see today is a transition of my life. And who I am today is what I went through yesterday. And it drew me into doing something that I never have done before. Challenge myself by putting myself on fabric as a quilt, and you could say in the quilt form. You know, and I felt that, when I thought about doing that, I said, how people think about me? Am I self-centered? Then I said, no, it's that people really want to know who you are. They want to know if you well. They want to know how well you made it in prison. A question was asked me, Gary, why are you not insane? Why are you not mad? Why are you not bitter? And I answer this way here. From the short time I've been out of prison, I realized that what you asking of me, that there are more insane, crazy, bitter people out of society that they have in prison.
You know what was really interesting to me about this series of self-portraits was that, the fact that you were reclaiming your image. So all of these photographs that are the source material, many of them are in this vitrine over here, and they're all very small, about 2 inches by 3 inches, maybe 4 by 6, and they're all photographs that other people took of you.
Yes.
Sometimes your brother Jimmy took one of them, right?
Yes.
Other times, like the one of you in solitary was circulated in the mass media. And I'm really just struck by the way that you reclaimed your image. And I just wanted to add that for people that didn't know that so many of all of these portraits are really taken from photographs people took of Gary. And something else that struck me, I think I want to wrap up our conversation and move to questions, but before I do, I want to talk about Detroit. And I want to do that because this is where we are. And to look at 41 and a half years being wrongfully incarcerated for a crime you didn't commit, due to the issues with integrating public schools and busing. And there were 3 cities in the United States that dealt with that, and outside of New Orleans. Boston and Detroit, Michigan. And I was actually shocked in my research that in 1974, the Supreme Court case that really sealed really set the tone for public schools in the city after the uprisings and white flight, this whole history of the city that, Carol, I'm sure you're very aware of. But there were people in Detroit that were here supporting you, that your mom wrote to. And there's people in this room who actually picked up your mom and your brother from the airport in 1976, who we met yesterday. And your mom wrote to Rosa Parks, and you should tell the story. I think you should tell the story. Maybe talk to us about Detroit and its impact.
Yes, when I arrived on death row in 1975, there were guys that came up and asked me, do you have support? I told them yes. They said, who? I said, my mother. Okay, do you have support? I said, yes, my mother. No, do you have an organization supporting you? No, I really didn't know the meaning of what an organization meant. They said, do you have churches supporting you? I said, yes, family and community church. I said, okay. They said, do you have support from the people? See, I hesitated. Because I really didn't know what he really meant from the people. We were talking about my family, the people that wasn't victims. And the guy, his name was Bacala, he told me, he said, Gary, you're young, the system is determined to kill you. And we feel that you need support from the people. They gave me magazines and newspapers to read. I remember reading the first Guardian newspaper, then the militant newspaper, then the Balalian newspaper. They was giving me books. They was telling me you need to read this. And they said, when you do, they said, then you need to write to these people by telling them what happened to you. And as I began to write, to express what happened to me, they helped me. I sent that letter out. These guys I didn't even know. These guys I heard so much about that these guys was dangerous. These guys gave me envelopes, stamps, addresses, and told me to write these letters out because we didn't have a copy. So I had to write these letters over and over and over again and to take and send them out. And do you know, within 3 to 4 weeks, I started getting support from people all over. And my mother started getting phone calls. People started visiting my mother. And my mother was, she had taken on a big burden. Mothers, I would like to say this. They say God created a perfect human being when he created the woman. You would never meet anyone in the world better than your mother. Anybody ever gonna love you to the day you die, to the day you die, it's gonna be your mother. Your first love in your life is your mother. My mother would have been willing to lay her life on the line for me. My mother struggled. My mother traveled the country to speak in my behalf. And when my mother had opportunity to come to Detroit, that was one of the best things that happened to my mother. Because my mother realized that she wasn't the only one that was fighting the cause to free her son and to save herself life. Detroit had become the hub of support that I've gotten. It resonated. It kept my family going. Until my mother, when she visited me, my mother spoke highly of the people that she met here in Detroit. And it was an honor to meet Larry and Nancy yesterday. But he was the one that picked my mother and brother up from the house, from the airport. And
Can you stand up?
We are talking about young people who stood up, because when they saw me, they saw themselves. Just like today, young people that are standing up because they're saying that enough is enough. They're the one that gave my family hope. Just like the young people today is giving other families hope that they're not alone, that they're willing to fight that battle along with them. So it's an honor to meet those two individuals, and there's probably others in here that supported to get me out. And I want you to know, although it took 40 years, but let me tell you something. Don't think those 40 years went to waste, because they did not. Those 40 years gave me an opportunity to get myself together. I didn't leave prison not knowing myself. But it took 40 years to change the hearts and minds of the ones who were responsible for sending me to prison. Because you know what? Even though they did not have the courage to undo the wrong that they did, their sons and daughters did it for them. So, you know, my life been quite transformative, and I appreciate life every day. And I appreciate what's happening today. But like always, you may take things for granted. I don't. I cherish each and every opportunity that is given me. Meeting people every day, because I, at one time, was deprived of those opportunities.
I think it's a really great time for questions. Thoughts, comments? Sure.
Tell us about this behind you.
All right, the piece, the mirror behind us. I decided to do that piece because in memories of a friend of mine, Leslie Smith. Leslie Smith, he was a lifer in prison. And when I say the lifer, this guy had 99 years for selling drugs in the 70s. Him and I became good friends. And this picture of us was taken in 2004. There you go. In 2004, several months later, Leslie took sick. Leslie took sick, and he was diagnosed of having AIDS, and he died a week later. And in memories of him, But I saw the picture, and knowing that he didn't have opportunity to walk among the free, because you know what? He died in November of 2004, and he got a gold seal of pardon from the government, January of 2005. So, yes, that's why.
And talk to us about the material choices you made in this work. Why did you choose the fabric you chose? Why did you choose the colors that you chose? What were your decisions?
Just like everything else, when you do something, you want to do the best at it. And sometimes by doing the best is not enough. And I went from one place to another, try to find something that gonna catch my eye. This one thing I learned, Carol, thanks to you and others, that you strive for perfection. And each and every piece of work that you do. And I was not satisfied until I find that piece of material that I wanted that gonna meet my satisfaction. And each and every piece that you have on here, I probably went to, I'm not gonna exaggerate, but I cannot. I went to about 10 different fabric places to look for the right material. Because I wanted to do my best, knowing that this was an opportunity to show my work. And that's what I did.
Carol, I want to ask you a question now, unless we have a question from the audience. Okay, final questions. Let's return to fabric and textile and the way that marks and kind of discoloration, imperfections, one might call them, on the surface of fabric draws you to it, actually. Can you talk to us a bit about your process of selection?
Yeah, I'm not the storyteller that Gary is, not as articulate with words.
I'm preaching.
Absolutely preaching. But I really think that my work tells the stories that I cannot articulate verbally. The work that I'm doing right now is inspired by Detroit. You know, I started this series probably in around 2000, something like that. But it was at a time when journalists and people were coming to Detroit. And I mean, they badmouthed it for many, many years. But, you know, there was real interest in people coming to Detroit talking about all of the ruined porn, if you will. You know, all the buildings that had been abandoned and just left to rot and whatever, you know, deconstruct. And I had just come off of doing another series of cityscapes, which were much more like non-traditional, traditional quilts. They were pieced using geometrics and typical kind of quilt imagery. So I had been, and with the work that I was doing in my day job, I was always on construction sites and looking at buildings. And I started to look at deconstruction and a little differently. I mean, I saw things coming off of buildings, and you know, after the facade is torn away, you can see one room is like one color over here, and another room is another color. To me, that was all very fascinating. I thought that it told stories. You know, this was about life. It was about tearing away the surface and really looking into the souls, if you will, and getting to know not only those buildings, but it was kind of a metaphor. It's how you get to know people. You know, you don't always, you know what's going on with that person on the surface, but when you start to peel away the layers. And so my work became more layered. And as I worked that way, I started looking more and more how those buildings became scarred and disfigured in the way that they did. But then those marks, again, told another story, you know. And I think it probably was a function of age as well, you know. Knowing, I mean, as you get older, you see that these scars tell stories, and they're beautiful. And so I try to make those marks in my work, you know, on fabric as much as possible. And it's been a joy to work that way. And it's a work in a total different way. You asked a question earlier about, you know, how it is to move into new areas. And I remember when I started doing this work, I gave a talk someplace, and somebody looked at me, you know, really quizzical, who knew my work. It's like, what happened? Why are you doing this? You know, it's like, you should have stayed where you were comfortable. But actually, this has probably been my most successful body of work, really. You know, it has really propelled me to another whole level. So, yeah, I enjoy learning. You know, I'm adding more embroidery. Those are marks. I look at nature and I see, I take a picture of the lawn across the street from me with the snow, you know, the footprints. Those are marks that look like steps to me. And those kinds of things. When I go to the beach, you know, seaweed coming up, those marks give me ideas of how to inform the work that I do. So it's kind of all around. And yeah, it's a joy to work in this way. I think that answered the question, didn't
It absolutely did, thank you. So both Carol and Gary are here for the entire opening. Please make sure to go outside and see Carol's mural and talk to both of them. Thank you so much.